I just downloaded a game from an ad, a mobile game from an ad the other day. Oh man, let me see what it's called. And this is like it really needs to look cool to me to give into it. Star Dive. It's called like something Star Dive. But the gimmick is like a monster catching mechanic, like a Pokemon kind of mechanic, but there's also like an action RPG element to it, and it's got like cool looking anime characters, stuff like that. They got me. I haven't put any, I probably won't put any money into it, but
You say that now. You say that now. The When Fortnite came out, I didn't put any money into it until my brother was like, "Look what I got, this cool skin." I'm like, "Ah, okay."
I I think the only time I've ever
Support
put
developers and all that.
it's
Yeah,
just when it's not
helping the
premium.
developers.
Yeah, but are you really helping developers with the premium or with the mobile game
I'm
microtransactions? Are you helping the
I don't know.
CEOs make more microtransaction games? That's the question.
Yeah.
Um,
We should get these questions on the record.
I'm recording right now, so
Me too, me too.
Oh, this is,
uh,
gonna step aside, Brendan Fraser. There's a new whale in town. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
so the only
Terrible
mobile
joke.
game I've ever put money into is Marvel Snap, that like card game,
Oh,
because it was like they really incentivize you, like, oh, if you put $10 in, you're gonna get like some cool stuff for this season pass thing. And I was just like, ah, what the heck, I'll do it. And then I just stopped playing the game after that month because I got bored, as as with most mobile games. But yeah, if anyone's in the chat and has really cool mobile games to suggest, I am interested to play new games. But yeah, they don't keep my attention super long. But anyway, this is the Aether Hour. We're with a small group today because everybody's kind of all over the place, just doing launch stuff still and figuring out what's next kind of stuff. But I'm here today with Gina and Tyler, and we're going to be talking a little bit through some community questions that have come in over the past couple weeks, and a lot of them are story related. So that's perfect for Tyler, who's our narrative director. So yeah, why don't we just kind of jump into some questions and chat. If you anyone that's watching live, feel free to just ask questions as they come up. Um, but let me get my notes out. I just copied and pasted them over here, and then I lost them.
Oh no.
Here we go. Here we go. I got it. Um, okay, there is one. Okay, why don't we start with this one because we have these different pieces of the stratosphere. And let's preface this to Tyler. Let's say, okay, certain questions, if they're just not okay to answer, just let us know. Or if it's a spoiler, just let us know if you're going to go into a light or a heavy spoiler. The game's been out for a couple
okay.
weeks. So I don't think we still want to spoil too much, but we can maybe do light spoilers. So one of the questions is, are there people living on the surface slash wastelands, which is, I guess,
Oh,
the burrows,
yeah.
right?
No, I think that's a good question. In fact, it's definitely been a part of. Well, it's not a spoiler to say it's been a part of what we're looking at to do next. But in the game, we do talk about the burrows and kind of what's on the ground. So yes, people do live there, but you have to think of the quality of life is pretty significantly hampered, right?
Mm.
You have junk raining down constantly. You don't have access to the sky, sunshine. You don't really have access to clean rain, even, right? Because the sky is covered with you, and you kind of have to deal with,
Like
uh,
drippings from the,
yeah, drippings or
yeah.
delusion. So it would be really irregular rain
Mm.
patterns because of that. And so, uh, and then you also have to contend with the wasting. The reason that people went up, right, is in part to get away and to almost quarantine from kind of the wasting, infiltrating populations. And so, uh, yeah, people do live there. And what we have confirmed in the main game is that you have a lot of the Aether refineries.
Mm.
Gia grew up in the boroughs where you had communities of people. It's a lot of like scavenger types, to make your living. We do have a whole kind of world built out of what's going on down there and what's included, but we only really hint at it and talk about it in passing in the main game. Um, yeah.
Yeah. What is are you allowed to say what kind of, I guess you kind of said it's like not a great lifestyle. Is there uh a social structure you can talk about, or is that giving too much away?
Yeah. No, no, and I mean I don't mind riffing about it. So
Sure.
if we if you think of each strata of the city as being kind of an evolution of societal structure where the lowers is very feudal almost, right? The uppers is far more kind of a modernized democratized states, and the heights is almost kind of this uh, technocracy utopia, or at least in theory, right? And so if you take that structure and if you go down to the boroughs, you have more of a lot of pretty much tribal or cult-like kind of infighting, or very like clan fighting type of thing. It's a devolved governmental structure, not very unified, a lot more brutish
Mm,
than say the lowers. So you have quite a few factions kind of living with the scraps that exist down there, all trying to claim that they're, you know, the number one. I mean, in Act One, when you get to meet the Scrapper King, for example, he calls himself the Scrapper King, but the guy's really not all that impressive. Um, but you take him on, you take upon that moniker in order to exude some sort of strength
mm.
or capability, to try to give yourself legitimacy. So uh, I'm not going to say it's full on Mad Max, but it's a little Mad Maxy down there, a little post apocalyptic, very different than what you have elsewhere in the city.
Yeah, what's so interesting, as I've been playing, I've been thinking about the social structure thing, and it's like it's you want to think at first that it's almost like, oh, the different cities are like states, but it almost is starting to feel
Mhm.
like they're different countries in the way that they like handle
Yeah,
things, because of the literal separation between everything. And it seems like it's not the easiest thing to go from one place to another for like a normal person. I know we've got like
yeah,
ferries and stuff, but if you're just an average person, how much are you really getting around from even like White Street to Dreamland kind of thing?
yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head of when we put this together. We conceptualized the city as as a whole bunch of city states, pretty
Hmm.
much.
Hmm.
We used kind of like the uh, medieval Europe, so like the HRE a little bit, or feudal Japan, where technically they're all part of the same entity, but they often act as uh, opposing actors that are fighting each other for material and whatnot. So yeah, and I think that speaks to what makes Gia's role so important in the world as being a smuggler. Is one of the few people that does have resources and contacts and the ability to move between. Where most people, once you've been incorporated into an island, you're kind of just stuck there.
Yeah. And we
Calico Gray,
oh, go ahead.
sorry
Go
to
ahead.
interrupt here, but says that Gia mentions her parents still live there um, on the ground. Did she aspire to get them out in addition to moving herself to the uppers?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Uh, I think I don't really have a good answer. And the reason I don't have a good answer is that when building out kind of Gia's backstory, we left blanks to fill in later. What I can say is where we've left things with her family is that she's Gia's really close to her siblings, um, not as close to her parents. Not saying that they're estranged or anything, but like it's not like she's going home for the weekends type of thing. Um, and so there's still that degree of wanting to help and to engage, but also there's that part of kind of American culture at the time. And I remember reading something on this. I can't remember the exact data, but effectively talking about how in America compared to other countries, for the longest time, it was culturally not only just like culturally accepted, but expected for people to like spread out and move out and to not stay where you're born. Like the US for the longest time had one of the highest rates of people living in places where they weren't born.
Mm,
And I think there's that degree of, thing here of people moving where there's opportunity and kind of making that a big priority. And so there's definitely that kind of cultural impetus for Gia to move up and upward and onward in order to, fulfill that betterment. Um, but all that to say, Gia is still close to her siblings, her sisters. And we have hints at it here and there, but we weren't able to explore in this game kind of more of that relationship.
mm.
But we do have stuff for it. So as soon as we get the opportunity, love to put it out there.
That's awesome. Moo has a really interesting question. What does each of you feel will be the defining memory, moment, or story from your time and experience working on Aether and Iron? That's that's tough. Um,
I got a lot more memories to go through. If
yeah.
Gina and Nick, if you got anything off the dome.
I mean,
Uh,
go
yeah,
ahead. Go
please.
ahead
Nick.
if you. No, this is a very on the spot question.
It is.
Um, there's a couple opportunities to work on really big assets, background assets, color background assets. Sorry, my phone is blowing up. Color background assets that was really cool because they ended up being like big backgrounds in the game. And I was pretty new to the project, so it was really cool that Gary, our art director, trusted me to like have a crack at it because I think everyone was kind of like, where is he at with being able to do stuff? So one of the most intimidating ones I did was the oh, Tyler, what is it? The big golden like dreamland background with the fairy.
Oh,
That what is that one called again?
with
Um,
the fairy? Which one?
Yeah, there's like a ferry that's moving, and there's like a bunch of
Oh,
shops in there. And then you can go into the
oh,
alleyway
oh,
from
oh,
that one.
the downtown exchange, the interior
Downtown
shot.
Exchange, yeah. So I didn't design it, I didn't draw it, but I painted it. And that was crazy. The thing was like 10,000 pixels wide. Like I got sent this like 2 gig, Photoshop file, and I opened it up and there's like a bajillion layers that I had to like mess around with and kind of come up with a color palette based on some of the references that Tyler and narrative team put together. But that was really, really cool. And it felt epic in the game. So I was pretty proud of that one. What are you thinking, Gina? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Sorry about that.
That's right.
Sometimes I feel like my computer fan is making my mic light up. So I mute anyway. Some of the cooler just experiences on the team have been some of the travel.
Mm,
Getting to go to Gamescom and PAX West was really cool. But just like as far as a connection, just to my time working on the project, just coming on as a community and social media manager has been just it's a fun and cool job to have and do. I haven't done much in social media before, so that's been sort of new and some discovery over the past year, doing those sorts of things, and just getting to connect with our community, meeting folks like the people who show up here in Discord every week. Like just Alex he's just always around and engaging with us, and so connecting with people like that on a real human level is just what um, it's what I like. It's what I enjoy doing, and um, yeah, go
yeah,
team.
that's
Yeah.
that's a good one.
Let's see. Okay, so there are being around here for so long, I think, I mean, there's a lot of like company type stories that I think stuck with me. Like the first time me and a coworker went to Boston, and we flew into New York instead, and because we thought it'd be cheaper and easier, and we rented a Tesla, and neither of us had driven a Tesla before, and so we had to drive through the night in a car that we were just figuring out, and we're like, look, self-driving, and we almost died. Like there's been plenty of days here that are just straight episodes of The Office, um, that probably shouldn't talk about in public. But for the actual game moments, um, I think there's been a handful of times that I've definitely been floored with kind of what I'm doing, and what it is that we're actually making. Like when I first put the different pitches for the game together, that was kind of surreal because like I was picking what game we were doing. Had a lot of really bad ideas, but Aether and Iron was one that was really cool. And I remember I dove way too hard into world building after that. I disappeared for like a month, and I built out this whole thing in World Anvil of like, here's 50 different factions and everything that they do and how they interact. And this is their history of each and every one of them, and their political relationship with each other, this and that. To which at which point I found out afterwards, like, that was not very helpful in any degree of the term. Uh,
It's
that
good
was pretty
skill
big.
skill building practice, right?
Skill building. Well, I mean, honestly, a lot of since I've cut my teeth on this project and I've learned on the job, there's been I think a lot of the standout moments are learning of like, that's not how you do things. World building 100 hours of written text with, that don't actually apply to the game is not something you do. It's not helpful. It is a waste of time. It is hard to communicate and let people form opinions. Um, I think there's also probably an overwhelming number of not great standout moments of like when we had to like scrap prototypes and start over.
Mm.
Like when at one point we had written the entirety of White Street, and then we had to scrap the entire thing and start over again. And so, there's there's versions of that intro of our game that don't exist, that will never see the light of day, and that was
Was it just
heartbreaking.
because it wasn't fitting with what else you guys ended up coming up with? Or
Uh, it was because there's been a few different reasons. There's a version that we've done that the version of White Street was too, the notes we got was too fantastical. It was too much. Um, and we needed to do a realistic take. And then I think the second time we did it, we were told it needs to pretty much be double the size of what it is, and so we had to go through and pretty much rewrite it, though we were still able to keep most of the material. Um, we did something similar with Dreamland, where one of the very first prototypes that we did of this current version of the game was we told a series of stories in Dreamland, and that entire prototype got scrapped, but we tried to find a way to incorporate the material from that into the game, and so like there's still bits and pieces here. Uh, there is a whole character from that original prototype that we are bringing back here at some point. So not to spoil anything, but
that's cool.
so that'll be fun. Yeah, but let's see. Standout point, the thing that I will tell my grandkids about, that I'll be excited. Okay. I think my favorite part about this whole process of building the game has been the historical research, to be entirely honest, of like finding out the actual history of New York and being able to implement it. Like the stories that I found while doing historical research are that I think those are just the coolest things ever, and I'll probably remember those longer than I remember individual missions I wrote in the game. Um, but yeah, I mean we've talked about some of the stories here of like White Street, Eli being based off a character that was turned into a gin mixer after he died, or the Pirate Queen of New York, or the why lobster palaces were banned for a short period of time. I think it was like the 1930s. There was like, it was called Slave Street, right? Because you could still, New York still had slavery at the time. Like there's all these interesting little stories. Oh, there was one I should read up on again before I say it, but there's one about like there used to be like an asylum or a prison in I think the East River that I remember reading a whole story about like there's all this politics about how to transfer kids in and out of it. That was
Mm.
a whole thing. Anyway, all this stuff I find endlessly interesting. One of my favorite mysteries has been in the 1930s, Mayor LaGuardia put together a Anthem of New York competition, and like I
Okay.
spent weeks trying to track down what happened to that music.
Uh-huh.
Like I went through the archives of all these newspapers. I looked relentlessly because you could see every time it was updated of like, the deadline's been pushed back or submissions are now open or they're now closed or, so and so was a famous musician at the time has submitted something. There's like a baseball team of kids that submitted a song for the Anthem of New York. And then it just like completely disappears, and I have no idea what happened at the end of the competition. No winners were ever announced. Nothing was announced that if it was canceled for good. LaGuardia never talked about it.
It's
And
interesting.
so I would love to solve that mystery at some point, but stuff like that I think is
Yeah.
what stick with me long term. Yeah.
That's that's really cool. Yeah, it's I've said this before, but at some point we need to do like the history of Aether and Iron kind of thing that has
The
these like
history of the history.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that like showcases all of these direct references and how much research you guys put into everything. It'd be really cool. Um, I think we can read. Should we read Calico Gray's comment?
Sure, yeah. I
Uh,
have a question after that.
okay. The idea of how you're supposed to work up to being better off than your parents and not dependent or physically close is a very 19th/20th century American cultural idea. It all fits well. If anything, the trend in the 21st century since the financial crisis in '08 is an aberration. That's what your comments on her backstory remind me of. Anyway, it would be cool to see some more memories of adventures with Alfonso at some point. And then they say, funny you say that because White Street has this long vibe of being destroyed and rebuilt multiple times. Wait, is there a question? Am I missing something?
No, I think they were just providing some commentary
Context.
there, but we do have some that came from Calico and others last week.
Hmm.
There's a lot of interest in the different types of Aether and Nellie's research at Olympus Park. Are you planning to explore the discovery of Aether and the dangers of innovation in future content? Of course, we know that people are getting a lot of Bioshock vibes, but say the Aether and Iron has its own distinct feeling. Um, will we see more Aether colors with different applications or get more of Nellie's story as we go forward?
Oh man, lot of good stuff there. So one to the first thing about like incorporating technology into like exploring more of the technology. I think the answer is being yes, we'd like to. We'd like to explore that more, in part because I think the optimism of technology fixing the future mixed with kind of the noir attitudes where everything is like hopeless and like we all live in a flat circle where misery and human suffering are never ending. I feel like those two things are really an interesting kind of and diametrically opposed, and that's why I think Gia and Nelly work so well together, is they both represent very different outlooks from the time. Some people will look to the sky and be like, "Hey, this tech will save us," and then a lot of people lived in the world and are like, "Oh, not really."
Yeah.
And I think that's also it's that that whole dynamic too is what made the 20s, 30s, and 40s such a big time for like societal utopian experiments, right? You have the rise of fascism and communism and technocracy, and you had some whole bunch of different like government experiments of like how do you run a country and how do you
Hmm.
make the perfect society? How do you build the perfect society? And I think in part of that is being like piggybacked off of a lot of where like that yin and yang that technology can solve, and humanity is depraved, and how do you kind of work those two together? So all that to say, would love to explore more. Funny that you bring up old, or not old, uh, additional Aether colors, because there was a version early on of this game where we had the whole spectrum
Mm.
of colors for it. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler because we've moved away from it, but we had different Aether colors represent kind of different effects, and they have like affect you differently. They do different things. Unfortunately, that whole tangent was kind of thrown out almost in its entirety. We barely brought red Aether back in, let alone purple. Uh, when the first version of purple Aether was something that could grant robots sentience, and it got a little bit too ridiculous, and we're like, okay, maybe we need to dial it back a little bit and kind of rethink what it is we're doing. Um, but like we had black was like necrotic, white was, oh, what did white do? Can't remember that one. We had yellow, which was more like electricity and power
Mm.
hungry, and it dealt with light. Um, can't remember a lot of the colors, but anyway, our concept artist, Juan Carlos, he did some amazing stuff, because it was not only we are going to do different colors, but we had this whole science built out on like, depending on how you, to use a nondescript sciencey term, depending on how you modulated the power, you could have not only different colors, but then it would take different physical shapes as it like interacted with reality.
Hmm.
All that to say, it got really big, it got really complicated, it didn't really go in the right direction. And I think what we'll likely do is slowly introduce more, because for the same reason of like red and purple being introduced in the world, is that the longer technology exists, then the more likely there's going to be some innovation, people pushing boundaries, and I'm sure we could find something on how it works.
Mhm.
Uh, so would love the opportunity to do more. Definitely going to try to find a way. But yeah, that's kind of where we are with that one. There's a second part of the question I can't remember.
I
What were you
think it
saying?
was diving into the discovery of it.
Oh, discovery. Oh, and then you mentioned uh
Yeah, let's see. It was the interest in Nellie's research at Olympic Park. Are you
yes.
planning to explore the
Mm.
discovery of Aether?
Yeah, so we have it. Back in the days when I was talking about where I did way too much world building, a part of that is that I built a pretty robust timeline of the world, and like not just a political history, but I wrote a cultural history and a scientific history of the world, or specifically New York. And so we do actually have like a science history of who invented what, when, how did it affect things, what happened. I think at one point we do drop lore hints here and there. It's something about like the Strasbourg Exposition, talking about kind of the first, foray into advancing technology. Um, all that to say is that we have stuff and we'd love to explore more. And in fact, we did have more about Nellie's work in the Heights at one point. Unfortunately, we had to cut it for time. But we had, at its biggest, you were going to have like this whole level up in the Heights, and then it shrunk into a cutscene cinematic, and then we couldn't fit it in to make it make sense. Also, a lot of the cinematics we have are from like Gia's perspective, and
Mm.
so Nellie doing a flashback wasn't quite going to working as smoothly. Um, but the big reason why I'd love to explore more of Olympus Park is, uh, when I first pitched this idea, it was coming off of the coattails of reading Devil in the White City, the history of the Chicago World's Fair,
Hmm.
and then I got really into reading about World's Fairs in general, and I find them just like some of the most interesting stuff, and I would love to explore more of it. I had so much for the Heights planned that we built out. Like I had a whole, at one point I documented for Christopher Tin of like, here's a like history of like music as it interacted with the 1939 World's Fair in New York City, and here's like the soundtrack, the songs that we've recovered in different archives, and all that had to be removed.
Oh man,
Yeah, if any of you do want a good time, World's Fair music from the time is it's kind of a trip.
really?
Um,
Is it?
it's
Is
fun.
there like a genre you could relate it to? Is it like jazzy or is it just
Uh,
something else?
okay, so you've seen Lady and the Tramp?
A long time ago.
Yeah.
Okay, do you remember this? You don't have to see it to know what I'm going to get at, but you know that scene where they're all in the park and they're all wearing like straw hats and there's like American flags everywhere
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, you know, white white 30 suburbia out in the park enjoying Americana type of thing. It's a lot of that music, like
Gotcha.
barbershop quartet type of
Uh,
stuff.
I see.
Um, but it's all like really utopian
Weird.
and despite that there's like some of the songs i I think in light of like what the 30s turns into, I don't know, there's a weird unintended darkness that you can read into it. Maybe it's
Oh
just because I
man.
listened to it too much and I'm starting to go insane, but yeah, it's a lot of
That's
fun.
amazing. All right. What are people saying? I
Yeah.
meant. Oh, go ahead, Gina.
I was just going to go into the comments as
Yeah.
well. Calico says they mentioned this in their Steam review, but they like how you didn't portray the lowers as just a horrible dystopia and one note tone of exploitation and oppression. I like that people still find success and family life and a way to have a good time. And go on to ask, is there sort of a worked out hypothetical science of Aether in the lore that informs some of the engineering things that Nellie says? Or is it, for lack of a better term, closer to technobabble? As a layperson, they can't really understand. So, either way, it's well done.
No, that's well, thank you. I really appreciate the compliments. I mean, uh to wow, this AMA is just Tyler babbling way too much about this game.
No, it's good.
For the first part about talking about um the lowers, actually that reminds me, if let's see, do I have it on quick poll? Uh so one thing that was really important to me um when talking about the lowers and poverty in the game is if any of y'all have seen How the Other Half Lives by Jacob Riis,
Mm-mm.
it was a big influential photographer and kind of journalist, um, and which went on to document kind of the poorer parts of New York City. But one thing that I find extremely frustrating a lot of the time is this kind of one note depiction of poverty, as if people living in poverty are so bound that they stop becoming human.
Mm.
I think they can be dehumanized. People, living within that poverty, that, we can be turned into nothing but like a number that obviously is incapable of living, and you're living paycheck to paycheck, which is true, but just because you're living in that way doesn't mean that you're not also a human being, that like you still have a favorite food, you still have people you enjoy talking to, you still have things that you enjoy as a pastime, right? Like there's still hobbies, or there's still a way that you dress, or the way that you shop, or the way that you manage to survive that then influences your kids, like
And
um,
community and
community,
stuff
right?
like that.
Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
still real life. And I think it was important for us, if we were going to spend an entire game in the impoverished classes of the city, that we give credit to people for existing.
Mm.
And I think that largely comes from history as well. When, like, if you read enough history and you start realizing that these people had stories, that they were actually people, that they're not just unidentified poor person number 371 million and two, right? Like they're actual, people lived all the time. And it's the more you read about history, the more you realize that just because you were poor, yeah, life was miserable and but people can deal with misery all the time, and still find a way to live and to live with people. So it was important to us. And I think there was an interview actually recently that went into it, asked a question about, we have a very noir game and yet we can have a very bright color palette. And while I can jokingly say I forced us to have color because I'm colorblind and I prefer it, there's also a degree of, I think, dealing with tropes of the noir genre, which can treat people in poverty as a kind of this macabre background. And so us adding in color is a way to say that, people are still people. Like they're still alive, they're still living. They're not just crying all the time. They're actually doing stuff. So all that to say, it was important for us to actually depict the working class people of our world as genuinely human.
Yeah.
But to the second point that you brought up about technobabble, so this was something that was kind of important to us from the beginning on what we wanted to do with Aether Science, and in part why we moved away from the different colors, is that we wanted to at least have a level or two of like explanation and reasoning for why things exist. In the same way as you might find in Star Trek, it's like there is some sort of internal logic, and if you ask questions, like you should find some sort of answer. If you keep asking questions, then like I don't know. The problem is that all of us are writers and not actual physicists, so a lot of our science is based off of a layman's understanding of how radiation and radiation and energy work, how the states of matter work, how there was this whole, I remember because it killed my brain, figuring out how what plasma is as a concept, and how we, like in like real life, how we actually interact with it and contain it, and how we collect it. How do we collect light particles was kind of a trip. So all that stuff is we did our research, and we tried to find a way to incorporate that into actual science. I mean, one of Nellie's first rants when she starts talking about how she got her master's at Columbia, and she focused on the Cherenkov effect. The Cherenkov effect is like a real thing, and it's like when, oh gosh, I can't remember exactly, but it's when something is radioactive but glows blue. Is what the Cherenkov effect is. Now, I couldn't tell you, especially now after so long, why exactly it is what it is or how it works, but that's like real science type of thing. So we pulled what we could, we built what we could, and we tried to make it as little technobabble as we could manage. So hopefully that answers that good question.
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, it's kind of like you do what you can, not being a physicist, and at least you guys tried to make it coherent in the context of this like fantastical world.
Yeah, Calico says, I totally get it. I'm a bureaucrat trader by day and a writer by night. So delving into deep scientific concepts, even for world building, is always a bit of fish out of water situation. Very much.
Yeah.
And I did want to go back to another one of the questions from last week that I think Calico may have also brought up there, is a bit of the sort of design philosophy and some of the narrative choices that we make. We jump from like the dance party into a war sequence, which is, kind of, I think, caught some people off guard, and ask why the Bucketheads didn't just raid the dance hall, another where people were, maybe they were expecting a fight, and instead, Gia and Needles have these tender moments. So I guess kind of what is some of, I feel like I've totally lost the thread on this question.
Oh no, but I think what you're pointing out, I can explain kind of the reasoning behind it. I think I can agree that we should have made it stronger, or could have. When we first played Nations Crusade, we did have more content that we're going to put in to help bridge that gap. but the feeling that we were going for was essentially talking about how dissent can work in a crumbling kind of authoritarian regime type of thing. And the idea with the dance hall being, so one, being a floating dance hall, it changes locations often as in order to kind of avoid being broken up. And so at least plausible deniability, it hid well enough, right? But I think also if you diving into Nations Crusade, how Annie consolidated power is that she would plant a mission on an island, slowly grow the influence of that mission, where it was able to then knock off the Baron and like take control of the island over, closer to itself. And then that means that the influence that Annie had, it was based off of kind of this moral conformity, and it wasn't built off of consensus. And the general theme kind of that we're going for Nations Crusade is the fact that that moral authority was built off of an idea of like moral strength. And the way that you combat that is by finding inconsistency, finding hypocrisy, revealing the weak points of that moral strength. And that's why, going on the pilgrimage, you see the rampant corruption. Going to the dance hall shows that no, not everybody is living in this utopia. There's actually dissent. And there was more that we had to kind of reinforce that theme, but it's all going towards kind of breaking this narrative that Nations Crusade is a monolith of happy Puritans, happy moral Puritans. So that was the intent. And that's why it wasn't meant to be broken up, because it's maybe Annie doesn't have as much actual power as you thought. Maybe the Bucketheads don't have eyes and ears everywhere. It really is based off of, when you have a surveillance state that you can't actually afford, and so you got to turn citizens into the surveyors. It's like if we could talk about the panopticon and stuff, but Foucault and the like, but we don't need to go that far. All that to say, that was kind of the intent of kind of breaking the facade that Annie had constructed. As to kind of like why we focused more on giving the heart-to-heart moment, that we could have had it being broken up and probably given a more dramatic ending, but by the end of the project, we were being a little bit self-indulgent of like, I just want Gia to dance. I want her to put on a pretty dress, and I want her to dance, and I want her to talk, and I want her to have a heart because it'll be fun. It will feel better. But I think also too, again, not executed as well, but a little bit of that calm before the storm, a little bit of that, even in the midst of suffering and oppression and constantly being, living in a community where you constantly have to watch how you perform because of moral expectations. Even within that heavy restriction, there is still places where you can be yourself, and you can still let loose, and you can still kind of be a bit free. Is kind of what we're shooting for, of like, there is still that subaltern, there is still that undercurrent story of where in the midst of it all, there is highlights of non-oppression. So long answers again, but hopefully that touched on what we're looking for.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Calico says, I did like the calm before the storm moment because I knew things were about to escalate. I just didn't know how quickly.
And which is a fair criticism. Like I said, we did have a kind of a better transition, and we're working to kind of get some of that stuff back in, to transition it less abruptly. But yeah.
I think this is a fun one that came in. Is New York the only floating city, or are there major population centers all over the world living in the sky?
Oh, that is one of my favorite topics to go into. And Josh jumped in right to hear me talk about this for the umpteenth time. But uh yeah, New York is not the only city. New York is one of many. The world has been revolutionized by it. New York is simply kind of one of the earliest adopters. Uh, Behind the scenes, we have a whole bunch of history of other cities that we've been putting together. The reason why we didn't jump into it too much in this game is we wanted to keep the story focused, right? Like, and
Yeah.
I was looking at the comments someone was talking about, or where we were talking before about like American attitudes at the time.
Hmm.
Even if you ask Americans or people around you now, hey, what do you think is happening over in such and such country? They'd be like, who gives a crap? Like, I
Hmm.
don't know. They're like, but no, but they're doing this really cool stuff and all this thing is going on. Like, have you seen this? And they're like, it's not here. So why do I care? Uh, so there's a little degree of like, if we're dealing with this story here, and while definitely there's that melting pot element of people from all over the world that kind of insert themselves into the story on occasion, like Gia's family, Benny's family, a handful of other. Tiana has this little storyline talking about kind of where she comes from and what's going on. So it's definitely there, uh, but it's not something that's going to naturally come up often. Um, all that to say, yeah, cities that we're looking at, we've built out a whole bunch of stuff. Like I can say that London definitely has this whole thing that we're building out, and I would go into detail, but it gets kind of bizarre and kind of how we're building that history since the UK lost World War One. We have London developing very differently. Berlin for sure. Uh, my personal favorite is Jakarta, because we're building out kind of a whole massive history for that one. Not for anything necessarily,
Do
just
we
because
ever
I find it fun.
explain where the source of the discovery came from?
Of Aether,
Yeah.
we talk about briefly, uh, I think, but it might not actually come up. Um,
Okay. Yeah, we
yeah,
don't have to go into it if it's not like apparent or.
no, no, yeah, I can't remember if we go explicitly, yeah, because it happens right at the end of the American Civil War.
Mm.
Is where we place that. Uh, but yeah, all that to say is plenty of other cities do it. They each have their own kind of way that they approach it. And uh, in the same way that I think that the 1930s are fascinating as a historical period is because so much in the world was happening. The world was becoming so much bigger. You had like the rise of really wealthy and powerful nation states that were experimenting with stuff. And yeah, it led to a whole bunch of tragedy. And I think that it ended a lot of that kind of utopian projects, but as an era of like how society was moving, it's opened up so many opportunities for us to kind of explore. So, um, yeah, I would love to talk about more of that, at some point, but I don't think I can go into too much detail right this instant.
Yeah.
Um, that and one caveat there being, get me in the right mood and I'll probably start riffing too long in Discord about like, yeah, this one, San Francisco did such and such.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
Lord Channel. Everybody,
yeah,
Lord
I'll,
Channel.
I'll talk too much in the lore channel. Yep.
We had another just about this is a little bit on the design side, but are there criteria for making an encounter a combat encounter versus a skill check or something else?
Yes. So when traveling around the world, we built out the encounters to react to the amount of heat that you have. So if you have zero heat, most encounters you can get through fairly easy. Um, I think some of them you just get like shoot on through. Then you go up in heat, and then it takes a skill check to get through. And then there's like kind of not it's easier. Uh, and the final one is if you have max heat or high heat, then you have a pretty good chance of triggering a combat either right away or some really, really high cost to pass to get through. Either like a really difficult skill check or really high just like financial cost. So yeah.
Calico says, I like that the world kept turning. You meet people from Australia, etc. Too many works lean on that this city is the last bastion of humanity and the rest of the earth is a wasteland trope. I'm thinking of making my second playthrough more of a high heat run just to see that content. That's cool.
I mean, that'd be cool. I mean, we tried to build it, you know, as a small team, limited resources, trying to figure out the game. We knew that we weren't going to create infinite replayability. It's not the game we're building, but what we could try to do is provide some variability in how things were built. So you will get different stuff in a high heat run. It will play differently, at least when traversing around the map. And if you're trying to not do too much heat, then conversationally, you'll probably lead to making some different decisions. Especially since you get a buff for being like tough and intimidating when you're in high heat. So you'll go in a bit more guns a-blazing and stuff. But yeah, be a lot of fun.
Do we know yet if anyone has beaten permadeath?
I don't know. That is a good question. Honestly, that's so
It's
punishing.
brutal.
I can't. Yeah, not for me. Definitely not for me.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what else. Oh, Alex said, I can understand why you wouldn't necessarily want to talk about this right now, but what are you thinking of doing in regards to getting some of what fell on the cutting room floor back into the game? So we can be kind of vague about this if you want.
Fake, yeah. Tell you what I can say is that we have a bulk of content that we had set aside for if we had an opportunity to put in an update, we would. So I can say that there's stuff that is set aside that we cut that like this we could put in with, without being too resource intensive.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the type of thing we would love to have the opportunity, but I can't say one way or another. I don't think at this point what is actually making it in.
Yeah, I think I can say that there will be content updates in the future of Aether and Iron. So there will be more to see, and there will be more to learn about what those things are.
And it is, and I guess, yeah, keeping it vague, what we do have planned is stuff that does spread out across the entirety of the game. Some areas will get a little bit more love than others, of course, but the stuff we have planned is going to appear throughout. So if you do another playthrough, it shouldn't just be having to wait until one point in time to get more stuff. So, but before I talk myself into a hole I can't get out of, I'll stop there.
Calico also says, when designing player choice, did you conceive of a wrong choice and a right one and try to make it difficult to guess? Or was it more about diverging paths without either being objectively better?
The approach that we had for choices often was, what are the different like rational options that could come out of a situation?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, I don't know about y'all, but throughout, just in everyday life, oftentimes we are faced with choices where there's no clear right answer, but there's a lot of different options that you could rationalize. And so we tried to approach it in that way of like, okay, if we did a lot of role play story time of like, okay, you are in this position, you have been faced with this, you are Gia, what are the different things that you would think of that you could do?
Yeah. And
we would take that and be like, okay, narrow it down to ones that we can put in and kind of go from there. Now that was kind of limiting in that if Gia as a character is making a lot of these choices, it means that it's like a smaller scope of what's available because Gia is a competent human being that's been around for a while, and so if she's going to make a choice, it's going to be based off of kind of what she knows or what she's familiar with, type of thing. Doesn't mean that she's infallible, as I'm sure y'all have found with the secret endings. But it does mean that she's not going to just like run around with her head cut off because she can, type of thing. So yeah, that was kind of our general
I think
approach.
that answers that. Cool. All right, I think we're getting close to the end of the hour, and I think all these other questions might open too much up right now. So I think this is probably a good point to cut it. But thank you for everyone that has joined live. Just remember, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can join us live every week, and we just hang out and talk about the game. We might have some guests on in the coming weeks, so just kind of stay tuned. And thank you to everyone that has also played the game so far. That's really, really helped. If you haven't written a review yet, that would also really help. So yeah, keep your eye out for more stuff from us, and we will see you guys all soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.